One of the last remnants of the Byzantine Empire, the Despotate of Maria, fell to the Ottomans in 1460, leaving the Republic of Venice as the only other significant presence in Greece. Meanwhile, the conflict between King Matthias and Emperor Frederick III over the succession and the Holy Crown continued. Pope Pius II and Matthias's chancellor, Bishop Vites, were trying to find some way to reconcile the two monarchs and have them form a united front against the Ottoman threat. An added problem were rising tensions between Matthias and the Hussite king George Podebrady of Bohemia, because of the raiding Hussite mercenaries in northern Hungary who tended to run for safety across the Bohemian border. There was also the fact that Podebrady was trying to make friends with Frederick III, thinking that an alliance with the Holy Roman Emperor would protect the Hussite king from any Catholic efforts to overthrow him. Naturally, Matthias began to see Podebrady as a potential threat. But Podebrady and Matthias had something in common. They were diplomatically isolated. As parvenu royalty, they had no siblings or cousins at other European courts to contact and conduct diplomacy with. Their lack of royal pedigree made even opening diplomatic relations difficult, and Podebrady had the added difficulty of being a heretic to the rest of Europe. With no other options, the two upstart monarchs decided to finally seal the previously agreed upon alliance with Matthias's marriage to Catherine Podebrady in 1461. The same year, a crisis erupted around Bosnia. King Stephen Tomašević ascended to the Bosnian throne after the mildly suspicious death of his father Thomas. Per the new king's request, Pope Pius dispatched a delegate, Nicholas of Modrus, to perform the coronation. What followed was a very sternly worded letter from King Matthias to Pope Pius, objecting to the unauthorized coronation of a traditional vassal. Chancellor Vites and Nicholas of Modrus attempted to do damage control, and they got Matthias to begrudgingly promise to help the King of Bosnia in case of an Ottoman attack. Things looked up for Matthias in 1462. Negotiations opened up with Frederick III, and Jan Jiskra submitted himself to Matthias's service. A large portion of Jiskra's mercenary army joined the king's Black Army, significantly swelling its numbers and expenses. Matthias gave Jiskra some estates, and surprisingly, Jiskra lived out the rest of his life in Matthias's service and is presumed to have died peacefully at his estates around the year 1470, while the rest of his old Bohemian mercenary bandits were dealt with through a campaign of mass hangings. Meanwhile, in 1462, Prince Vlad III Tepes, the Impaler, was kicked out of his domain of Vlachia and replaced by his brother Radu III, an Ottoman puppet. Vlad III fled to Transylvania and was imprisoned on the order of King Matthias, presumably to be used as every other prince of Vlachia before, as a proxy in the conflict against the Ottoman Sultan. Around the same time, the Ottomans were building two great naval fortresses on the Dardanelles, leading to a drastic deterioration in relations with the Republic of Venice. Long story short, after the fall of Constantinople, the Venetians and the Ottomans found common ground in thrashing the Genoese, leading to Venice gaining many lucrative concessions in Ottoman territory. When the fortresses on the Dardanelles were built, all passing ships were stopped, searched, taxed, or destroyed. This, combined with more taxes, customs duties, and seizures of Venetian concessions, meant that the Sultan was readying for war. In April of 1463, Ottoman forces attacked the Venetian fort of Argos, beginning a 16-year-long war. In May of 1463, Sultan Mehmed II marched into Bosnia. King Stephen Tomašević was assured by Nicholas of Modrus that Matthias would be coming to his aid. Matthias's army did begin a march southwards, but it was either too late or Matthias stopped the army at the border and waited. The King of Bosnia and his court were very quickly captured by Sultan Mehmed, who demanded the complete surrender of the entirety of the kingdom, which was ordered by the captive king Stephen Tomašević. Almost all of the castles opened their gates to the Sultan's army, and the majority of the Kingdom of Bosnia fell to the Ottomans within a few days. But because of the defiance of those that did not open their gates, Mehmed had Stephen Tomašević decapitated. Puppet kings were installed to nominally rule over Bosnia, but they were insignificant and were soon gotten rid of. Because of the rapidity of the surrender to the Ottomans and the complete inaction of the surrounding powers, it is said that Bosnia fell with a whisper. In the rest of Europe, the quick fall of Bosnia was blamed on its endemic heretic population. With the fall of Serbia, Wallachia, and now Bosnia, the buffer system that provided some protection for the realm of St. Stephen had completely collapsed. Some historians have asserted that Matthias let the buffer states collapse, because he did not trust the local princes and wanted to assert more control over their territories. Some asserted that Matthias couldn't help the buffer states because he was too busy with affairs in the north of his realm. But while those do form parts of a bigger picture, I tend to agree with the notion that at the time, Matthias realized that he could not win against the Sultan's army in a direct engagement. At best it was an unfavorable gamble, at worst it was suicide. No matter how well trained or experienced it was at this point in time in the early 1460s, Matthias's army is still too small to fight the Sultan alone. And if Matthias lost his very expensive army, his only leverage of force, externally and internally, would be gone. Matthias could not fight the Sultan alone. And that was the big mission of his Chancellor Bishop Vitéz, transform Matthias into a rallying symbol of anti-Ottoman diplomacy, someone to unite Europe against a common threat. Propaganda was spread inside and outside of the realm, calling Matthias the lone defender of Christendom, and his realm its bulwark and bastion. And the interests of Christendom were equated with the interests of the realm, that is to say, the interests of the king. If we can say for certain that Vitéz ever influenced Matthias, it was pushing him towards the anti-Ottoman cause in his early rule. Diplomacy would yield its first successes soon after the fall of Bosnia, as Matthias reached an alliance with Venice, and on the 19th of July 1463, Frederick III and Matthias met at Vienna Neustadt and signed a treaty.